What's up, guys? Welcome back to Tidal Gardens. Overall, I would have to say that I'm super happy with all the different systems that we have going here, but that's not always the case. There are a few systems that, for whatever reason, go through a pretty cursed phase. Our SPS show tank, for example, had the massive, most ridiculous, ugly phase possible. Our gigantic Peninsula show tank, I did an entire video about how that tank was cursed. I would have to say that both of those tanks figured themselves out. It's worked out now. They look great. I will tell you the story now of the most recent cursed tank that we have. Am I that worried about it? Not really, but also it just goes to show you that all your efforts to do stuff right, sometimes it doesn't quite work out immediately. Let's take a look. And here we have it. So guys, can you tell that there might be something wrong with this tank? This cloudiness that you're seeing, you might be thinking, oh, well, it's just some little bit of diatoms on the glass. It's a new tank setup. You just have to scrape the glass and this thing will be clear. No, this glass is perfectly wiped down. The cloudiness that you're seeing is the entire water column. You can't see more than a good, 10 inches into this tank. The whole thing is just solid something, and we'll get to what that something is later. The idea behind this tank was that we had started a monoculture of Micromusa lordhowensis. Micromusa, for us here, really struggled when we put them into like giant mixed systems. I don't know if it was like the coral pathogens going back and forth, if it was just something, maybe some kind of chemical warfare, but almost all of these Micromusa that we had were like struggling tremendously. So we put them all into a quarantine tank all by themselves. They all recovered when they were kept alone. At some point, we wanted to put them into a larger system and farm them a little bit more aggressively that way. So that's where this tank came along. This tank has gone through many iterations. It first started out, believe it or not, as a quarantine tank specifically for Acropora. In our other smaller aquariums, we really weren't able to have the water volume for the stability. We didn't have enough head space to really send strong flow across. So we thought this would be perfect for quarantining a lot of our Acropora intake when we did a lot of Acropora intake at the time. Not so much these days. Then we messed with the idea of doing gorgonians because, again, height, a lot of water flow. That never materialized. We just ended up keeping that project at the greenhouse. We then had an Aptasia outbreak in here and decided to just grow Bergia nudibranchs. The Bergias ate through about 10,000 Aptasia, and there's no more Aptasia. This tank system failed as an Aptasia farm. You see where I'm getting at, where everything that we've kind of done up to this point kind of cursed. Now we have this plankton bloom with our Micromusa. It seems like it's about par for the course. I don't want to keep you all in suspense too much. What this is an active culture of T. isochrysis phytoplankton. When we first set up this tank, the nutrient levels were super low. And I was thinking, you know what the heck? I'll just put in a little bit of my extra phytoplankton, and it'll probably just die off, and maybe some corals, maybe some inverts that are in there, they might eat it, whatever, just to raise the nutrient level just a little bit. Well, that didn't happen. It's very ironic because in the past, I struggled like crazy in our cultures to grow T-iso. And now that I dump it into a Micromusa system, fully expecting it for it to die, it does this, 150 gallon plus culture of T-iso now. So it's all kind of silly because this tank should be so much better just on paper. It is a 150 gallon planet aquarium, very, very nicely built. I think it's every bit of 3/4 inch class, maybe 5/8. We put it on an alufab stand. It came with an overflow box kit that I was not happy with. Really not happy with it. It leaked. It wasn't high enough capacity. All kinds of issues with salt creep. So we fabricated our own custom one, made a custom sump for it down below. and we're running it right now with one of the testers of the Tunza Orca oscillators, which are very, very cool devices. We'll talk about all these things, but my point is there's a lot of cool tech here. Oh, and Philips Coral Care lights. This tank should be way better than it is. Sometimes you do all the things, check, 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 and it's still, you wind up with T-ISO soup. Talk about this sump just a little bit. Custom sump made here locally. My only complaint, which unfortunately is a gigantic complaint, is that I goofed up. When I'm designing a sump, I really just wanted something super simple. Water flows in here, it goes through a little chamber, down into some filter socks, and then an open space for your protein skimmer. That is literally all I was looking for. The height of this little section here is where I goofed because it really, really needed to be like 1 or 2 inches taller. Where that really screwed me is this water level here. It turns out it is just shallow enough that none of our smaller skimmers work. That height, for whatever reason, these different skimmers, we've got some from Nios, some from Tunza, they just need a little bit, and I'm talking like 1 inch maybe, more water in there. And we don't have 1 inch more water, so we don't have a skimmer, at least not in the sump. What we do have, comically so, is a protein skimmer that is mounted magnetically to the inside overflow of this tank. Now, I mentioned before, we did something a little bit different here. Originally, there was one of those kit-styled overflow systems to like work with a couple of bulkhead holes in the tank. Again, didn't love the capacity of that. Basically fabricated from scratch both the inside overflow, very large, acrylic, and on the outside using, I think, 3/8-inch glass. This entire outside assembly. It is not the prettiest thing in the world, but it is super, super robust. In fact, I was most worried about the weight of this guy. The glass itself was so heavy, it's like it's gonna sit kind of precariously, just silicone to the back of the Planet Aquarium. I was a little worried, but the precaution that I took was I got more glass and I made a U-shaped brace to go all the way around to just give it a lot more surface area binding. And then probably the biggest thing was I attached the plumbing via Unistrut to the AluFab stand. That was one of like the best things that I learned about plumbing from our plumber that pretty much did all the work in this whole building. It's at every 4 feet, you really should have pipe secured with Unistrut clamps. Now, this thing is not only held in place by all the silicone structurally holding it to the back of this aquarium, it is physically then bolted to the stand. It gives a lot of structural support. As for the drains, we just have 2. We have the main drain that goes to the filter sock assembly. That's gate valved off just to maintain a certain height here. The main drain is fully saturated, so completely dead silent. And the backup emergency drain has got a Maggie muffler on it, also quiet. Really shouldn't have anything more than a trickle at most going through this guy. And that just goes to like the auxiliary chamber. So if there ever is some blockage of an 1.5 inch drain that has a screen, it can go through this entirely down into the sump unimpeded. Over here, we have one of the Tunza Orca. I have to say that I am super impressed with this oscillator. It can pump a ton of water because it has like a pretty big Turbell style Tunza power head, but you can really fine tune the control of this to control both the intensity of that flow, the direction, the timing of the sweep. So if I only wanted a little bit more in the corners, I can dial that flow in from the app. A couple of things though that's kind of goofy about this. For whatever reason, the thickness of this particular rim on this tank is about like 1 millimeter bigger than what this is supposed to mount to. And because of that, it is barely, and I mean barely, holding on. It's not gonna move, but it's not holding on to a lot of material either. It is just one of these like goofy things. So if I ever had like a product suggestion for those guys, I would make this mounting piece, because this is all 3D printed. It's pretty flexible design in that way. I would just say, hey, you know what? There's some people out there with some really goofy wide braces and stuff to mount this to. It could be a little bit bigger just to accommodate. But anyway, super happy with this. Our unit, though, has started to make a little bit of a crunchy sound. Not sure if that's okay or not. Everybody else that I talked to, theirs doesn't. And ours started to make a little bit of like a grindy sound after about a month and a half. So we're keeping our eye on that. The technical details of the tank, you can kind of see some stuff isn't quite ideal. Some stuff is amazing. I'm super happy with it. Some stuff isn't quite working out as planned. Perhaps the most unfortunate thing about this tank, though, is that we've always struggled with the height of it. It's, I think, almost like 28, 30 inches tall. And that's always going to be a challenge to work in. That kind of illustrates like the difference between a home aquarium, where it is mainly a display and you're not really doing that much work on your display. A lot of it is more on the sump and things of that sort, and more about the equipment, less so about the actual glass box. When you have a work tank here, and so, for example, Becca, when she goes to shoot some of these micromusa for sale, immediately she was complaining. She got her t-shirt sleeve wet instantaneously just trying to reach in here on a stool because of that height. It's not as bad for me just because I'm way taller, but even me trying to like reach stuff in here, it's a little bit of a hassle, I have to say. That part has always been an issue with this tank. It is a great height for a show tank, less great for an actual work tank. What we'll probably do in the future is modify these racks so the corals are, you know, about midpoint in the tank. And perhaps just underneath, we will stack it with different types of like rock and media just to have like more of like a cryptic underbelly. As far as do we keep it a monoculture of micromusa? Possibly, but I think that there is some room to have a little bit of fun. If this T-ISO situation continues, I mean, we could wipe it out overnight just by installing UV if we really wanted to. But that got me thinking, we have certain soft corals that I know eat T-ISO. So we put in our Kojiwata nephthia in here. We don't do like a lot of the non-photosynthetics, like the scleronephtheas, the dendronephtheas, because it's a terrible idea. However, if you have a 150-gallon solid tank of T-ISO, maybe you do experiment with something like that. Maybe you do throw in an electric flame scallop and see if it'll do well. I mean, we are culturing live phyto as is. This is kind of an anomaly, obviously. So we do have a food source for it, even if this gets wiped. Those are just some ideas that we can play with in the future. It'll be an interesting time to see how this goes from its cursed state to something much more workable. All right, guys, that does it from here. Until next time, happy reefing.